Hello everyone, I'm very pleased to welcome you in the name of Agir pour le climat, Act for Climate, the Citizen and Transpartisan French association hosting our conversation today, investing in deep renovation for recovery, how-to guide for member states. Thanks for being here with us today, and greetings to all of our panelists, Adrian, Stéphane, Yamina, Peter, Bettina, and Kristina, who will present and discuss key elements for having our European building stock renovated and meeting our climate targets. The audience can ask questions by writing them down in the YouTube chat or in Facebook and Twitter comments. We will pick a few questions in our final Q&A session. Before starting, I would like to thank a few people here. Françoise Refaber, Tatiana Bostils, Olivier Sidler, Nicolas Dufresne, Benoît Lebeau, François Moisan, Andreas Rüdinger, Oliver Rapf, Philippe Ramos, Davor Simac, Nicolas Desquinabo, Christophe Milin, et Étienne Charby. They are all part of this ongoing conversation on building renovation. Exchanging with them has been very precious to prepare this web conference. Let me first turn to Maxime Pasquier for some opening remarks. Maxime is head of the building unit at Ademe. The French Energy Agency is our partner and sponsors the debate here today. I'm giving you the floor, Maxime.
Thank you, Luca. Good morning. First of all, I'd like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to open this conference on investing in deep renovation of recovery, how to guide for member states. We are very grateful to the association Act for Climate for organizing this web conference and for having put together such an interesting program. It is particularly important for Ademe to support Act for Climate, and especially this conference. As a French agency for ecological transition, Ademe is firmly committed to fighting global warming, and one of the priorities to reach this goal is to raise awareness, to change mindsets on investment practices. I would like to refer to the many initiatives led by Act for Climate, and among them this web conference. As you know, there are a range of important recovery plans being set up by the European Commission and member states. Energy renovation plays a crucial role in those plans. And the speakers in the program are uniquely placed to debate this and to highlight the key themes, trends, and current practices. As you may know, in October 2020, the European Commission published its strategy on renovation wave with one clear objective: double the annual energy renovation rate by 2030. France, like other member states, aims to speed up the renovation of buildings, something that has become necessary to reach climate neutrality by 2050. With the intention of boosting the national economy over the next 2 years, this public investment program amounts to 100 billion euros in total, 30 of which allocated to the energy transition. It gives prominence to energy-efficient renovation in the building sector. With over 7 billion euros in public funds to be invested by 2022, energy-efficient renovation of buildings is at the very heart of France's economic stimulus plan. Buildings with better insulation, energy-efficient schools, environmentally friendly office buildings, those are just some examples, some of the objectives of France's economic stimulus plan. This is an ambitious plan on a significant budget invested to tackle a real need. However, I would like to pose a question to you. In terms of energy-efficient renovation, does the amount of public funding in place answer to all the challenges? Unfortunately, today's practices still answer the question largely with a no. Complex procedures, high cost of the works, consumers' mistrust are some of the barriers to tackle reaching massive energy efficient renovation. Public funding doesn't make it all. For instance, the need to put in place one-stop shops offering single points of contact to get in touch households interested in carrying out renovation works with an advisor This advisor will provide a tailored advice and guide them through this process, from researching available funding and support to providing contacts of construction companies having environmental certification. This kind of advising mechanism has to remain available beyond the recovery plan. So we need to think beyond a 2-year recovery plan. Massive energy efficient renovations deployment requires political commitments and visibility over 5 or 10 years. It is about securing funding beyond the recovery plan. It is about preparing post-recovery with a climate strategy for public finances. The French climate and resilience law being currently discussed is an opportunity not to be missed. Support for households, businesses and communities is necessary to remove the technical and financial obstacles to many renovation projects. Taking the financial, but also the regulatory possibilities is necessary. And we also need a better visibility on the possible pathways to reach carbon neutrality. With this in mind, Ademe carries out regular foresight exercises to design carbon transition pathways to 2050. Our current work will be published at the end of this year. It will present 4 different pathways to carbon neutrality. It will also assess the impact of such pathways on resource consumption, such as construction material, land, and so on. Our work will explore the comparative impacts of different transition levers from sufficiency to efficiency. Sufficiency meaning reducing the average living space or building less, for example. We will also explore different renovation pathways, such as business as usual scenario, where we will observe the impact of a slow take-up of deep renovation. We will also look at deep renovation scenarios with varying rhythm, from renovating all the building at once or doing it step by step. Now, before coming to a close of these remarks, I'd like to say that as a driving force of the ecological transition, Ademe is committed to playing its part in achieving the objective of accelerating deep renovation on a continental level, alongside its European counterpart, of course. Lucas will now introduce our next panel in order to debate macroeconomic benefits of deep renovation. I hope you will enjoy this web conference, and I'd like to thank you for your participation.
Thank you very much, Maxime. I'm going to make a hopefully brief introduction and then introduce our panelists. Accounting for 40% of member states' total energy consumption and 36% of their greenhouse gas emissions, the building sector is the largest single energy consumer and emitter in the European Union. The building sector is central in the fight against climate change. To fulfill the Paris Climate Agreement, limiting global warming to well below 2 degrees and pursuing efforts to limit it to 1.5 degrees, the European Council in December 2019 set the target of achieving carbon neutrality by 2050. To be neutral by 2050, Member States last December raised the EU's greenhouse gas emission reduction target to at least 55% by 2030. To reduce Europe's greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% by 2030, the EU Commission estimated in the Renovation Wave strategy that it released last October that we needed to reduce buildings' greenhouse gas emissions by 60% compared to 2015. And to achieve this strategy, says the Commission, we should reduce the energy consumption of the EU's building stock by 14% by 2030 compared to 2015. Considering that only 1% of the building stock undergoes some kind of energy renovation each year in Europe, averaging a ridiculous 9% energy savings, our efforts should be multiplied by 15 or 16 if we were to achieve a 14% energy reduction target by 2030. The Commission says that we should at least double the annual energy renovation rate by 2030 and foster deep renovations, that is, renovations resulting in energy savings of at least 60%. The current law accounts for less than 1/5 of the energy renovations. Such a change in volume and performance may well not even be enough. The Building Performance Institute Europe estimates that the EU should reduce buildings' final energy consumption by 24.8%, not 14%, to meet our 60% carbon reduction target in buildings by 2030, meaning that we need to get 27 to 28 times as many results as we currently do. The BPIE says the average rate of deep renovation should approach 3% of European building stock as quickly as possible. Today, there are about 260 million building units across the EU, their floor area counting for about the size of Belgium. 90% of them will still be standing in 2050, and only 3% of them are rated A. We therefore need to engage a systematic renovation campaign, getting the full energy potential out of the European building stock. The task ahead of us is Herculean. Virtually no EU country is even close to where they should be. At our pace, it will take France more than 4 centuries to meet its 2050 target in private residential housing, about 3 centuries for Germany. Yet the magnitude of the task should not be discouraging. The deep renovation of buildings has so many advantages that it would be a very smart policy to implement, even if our fate on that planet was not at stake. Economic activity, job creation, fiscal returns, health, improvement of the quality of life, social benefits, all benefits that are even more valuable in times of recovery. It may also seem impossible to mobilize the hundreds of billions of euros, 243 according to the BPIE, that are necessary each year to bring our building stock to the A label and make a deep renovation worth tens of thousands of euros affordable for all households. It is not, actually. First, a very significant part of the investments in deep renovation will be paid for by energy savings and valuation of the building assets alone. 2, governments already spend several billions on so-called energy renovation, in truth maintenance, through public subsidies and loans each year. All that public money is wasted and should be rechanneled exclusively towards deep renovations. Helping people change their boilers or their windows is getting us nowhere. 3, the recovery plans are making more money available in the coming years to kickstart the renovation wave. Governments may deplore that they can't do more because there is no skilled workforce on the ground to do the job. This is true today. But they can use part of the recovery funds precisely to help enterprises upskill or reskill their workers in the 2 or 3 years to come, and to help create the ecosystem of technical assistance that is absolutely essential. Furthermore, the European population will likely decrease in the next decades, reducing the need for new buildings construction. It is therefore in the interest of the building sector to turn to the energy renovation market. Above all, by making clear their resolve to pursue a long-term and systematic deep renovation policy, governments will shape the market and generate supply. Governments may also be afraid that the European citizens would oppose having their homes renovated and fear of a social outburst like the one we had in France with the Yellow Jackets. But the French Citizens' Convention on Climate, by making deep renovation of buildings mandatory one of their main recommendations, as well as surveys, clearly show that people understand the need for a dramatic new course of action and would embrace it if they were given the financial and technical means for it. Now is the time. Our 2 panels of experts will explain why and how to proceed. The first one will show all the benefits that we as a society will gain from renovating our building stock if we follow a few guiding principles. The second one will tell you how to proceed financially and operationally. The conversation will mainly focus on private housing. I'm now turning to Adrian Joyce. Adrian is a professor at the Faculty of Architecture, not Archaeology, at the Catholic University of Leuven and director of Renovate Europe, a political campaign with the ambition to reduce the energy demand of the EU building stock by 80% by 2050. I'm giving you the floor, Adrian.
Thank you, Luca. Thank you for that kind introduction and indeed for the overview that you've provided to the audience of the challenges that lie ahead. Indeed, we agree here at the Renovate Europe campaign that very significant ambition is needed, and we constantly try to put into the debate the multiple benefits that will arise, and also we try to point out where the means are that can be applied in the market in order to achieve these very challenging targets that you have so ably put together for the audience. My task this morning is just to say a few words about the Next Generation EU initiative, as I'm based here in Brussels, and to talk a little about what the European Commission's reaction has been to the COVID pandemic and now their preparations for economic recovery moving forward. In fact, the Next Generation EU initiative contains a number of different elements, one of which is called the Recovery and Resilience Facility. And this is the facility that contains the funding that can now be applied for economic recovery within the EU. For the audience, the funding is earmarked to reach 672.5 billion euro, and they will come in two tranches, one of pure grants, so subsidies, money that can be given to those in most need, and that's 312.5 billion, and then 360 billion in loans raised from the market. In fact, I think all the money will be raised from the market. The key here is that member states have to prepare what are known as national recovery and resilience plans in order to apply for that funding. And the plans, once submitted by the end of this month of April, have to be approved by both the European Commission and by the member states themselves in the European Council. Then the money can begin to be dispersed. There are two more rules that are important with the money that make it actually not as attractive to some member states as to others. And that is that the money must be allocated through these national recovery and resilience plans to real projects before 2023, and all the money must be spent before 2026. And frankly, that makes it for the building sector in many of our member states. But one heartening aspect of the funding is that 37% of it must be dedicated to climate, which renovation of buildings, and 20% must be on digitalization. So more than half the funding must go really on preparing for the future, on preparing the transition in the energy sector and the transition sector. As I said a moment ago, the energy renovation of our building stock counts as a climate-related investment. And when money in the market, the member states are going to have to match those investments with reform within their countries. What kind of reforms are we talking about? Potentially to building regulations, reforms to how evaluation and monitoring take place. For achieving those reforms, we are aware that many member states lack the capacity and the technical ability to bring those reforms in, and even the ability to properly apply the funding to our sector. Fortunately, the Recovery and Resilience Facility now contains several opportunities for technical assistance to be provided at no cost to our member states. And the new technical support instrument under the RRF is a fund, if I remember correctly, in excess of €1 billion, which can be called on directly by member states without initial allocation to any one sector. The existing ELENA facility, which has been used to leverage private investment over the last funding period, is extended and expanded. And all of this is in addition to the existing normal 7-year budget of the European Union, which amounts to more than 1.1 trillion euro. So, as Luca said, why renovate to recover? What are the benefits? Well, in the Renovate Europe campaign last summer, we commissioned the Building Performance Institute of Europe to do a study to review all the information available on multiple benefits in order to check that what we've been saying over the years still applies. And indeed, they found that it does. And here I'm just focusing on 2 key elements from that report. The first is that for every 1 million euro invested in energy renovation of buildings, an average of 18 jobs are created in the EU. Now that varies per country from a high of 29 in Croatia to a low of around 11 in Italy. But the average across the Union is 18 jobs per million invested. But where are those jobs going to come from? I like to point out that the COVID pandemic has created a great deal of unemployment that will not recover quickly in the tourism and hospitality sectors. And we have been calling for member states to put into their plans upskilling of those workers to transfer them, if they're willing to come, into the building sector. And we will need a boost in the workforce to achieve the level of renovation that Luca outlined at the start of this panel session. We've also found through the BPIE work that holistic energy efficient renovation of hospitals reduces patient stay by about 11%, meaning that aggregated savings across a year could be as much as 45 billion euro in health budgets. In a separate study that we are aware of, Ecologic have found that by applying a methodology to the available funding, and this is just the public funding element, that France should be spending more than 6.4 billion of its funding under the Recovery and Resilience Facility on energy renovation programs. If I captured it correctly, that is the case because I think Luca said 7 billion from the European funds have been earmarked for renovation programs. My last slide was just to give you a feeling for some early examples from draft national plans across the EU. So Croatia plans to use the recovery funds for energy renovation that will incorporate earthquake resistance. And there we like that because you're getting the multiple benefit of stabilizing your building stock and future-proofing it at the same time as increasing its energy performance. Romania is set to exceed its fair share of the EU recovery funds by investing in comprehensive renovation actions in its building stock. We know that Italy will use much more than its fair share in order to fund its super eco bonus scheme, where with a tax relief, people who renovate their buildings are getting 110% tax break. Yes, 110% tax break over a 10-year period. So it pays you to renovate. And Spain intends to channel some of its recovery funding into comprehensive renovation to alleviate energy poverty, another key issue where great multiple benefits can be achieved by directing funding correctly. So I will stop here. I thank you for your attention. I hope I've painted a picture of some of the European funding that's available and a picture of some of the macroeconomic benefits that can arise. And I can also say, as Luca did, that we and our partners are ready to work sincerely towards this massive upscaling of energy rate and ambition in the months and years ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adrian, for your intervention. Now turning to Stéphane Quefelec, who will emphasize the social benefits from deep renovation in buildings. Stéphane is a senior energy and environment expert for the European Environment Agency. The EEA is an agency of the European Union, the task of which is to provide sound and independent information on environment. I'm giving you the floor, Stéphane.
Thank you, Luca, for giving me the floor. And also thank you for the invitation. We are actually, this invitation comes at a stage where the European Environment Agency is reinvestigating quite actively the topic of energy efficiency. And the intention is, of course, to place quite a big emphasis on the specific topic of energy efficiency in buildings. If well designed, energy efficiency in buildings can bring many benefits. I think several of them have been already cited here, but more importantly, these benefits might be fairly distributed across the population. And I insist a little bit on this fairly distribution of the benefits of these policies, because this will be the focus of my presentation. And maybe before going to this particular aspect of the benefit, I think a lot has been said on the macro benefits that can be expected from energy efficiency in buildings. Maybe I can add a little on the very macro benefit in terms of GDP growth. I think Lucas has given a lot of figures explaining the magnitude of the task, of the challenge, and also like the scale of the sector. It's a big sector. It's 9% of the GDP, the construction sector in the EU. And each time you stimulate a sector of such a size, of course, you stimulate the GDP as a whole. And in the context of the construction, or because the construction sector is mainly based on local small and medium-sized company, when you stimulate energy efficiency in building, you stimulate local business in the construction ecosystems. It's 90% of the companies in the construction sectors are small or medium-sized. So it's obviously crucial also, as it was said before, in the recovery plans in every country. In terms of energy, also, maybe I wanted to say that the consumption of energy in buildings is huge. It was said also before, 40% of the consumption of the total consumption in the EU is by buildings, or is made by the building sector. And in this sector, actually, the energy, and in the energy mix of this sector, the natural gas is still having quite a big share of it. For the residential building, it's almost 40%. So any increase of energy efficiency would reduce gas consumption and then gas importation, and would contribute, therefore, in reducing the dependency of the EU on importation of gas. This is an objective of the EU also in the energy field, purely energy field. And then the job market. As a job market, it was said already, a few figures, very striking. The construction sector is very labor intensive, and this is why energy efficiency can bring a lot of benefit in terms of jobs. And it's proven by past experience, because Ireland, for example, used the building efficiency to promote job creation after the crisis in 2008. And the home energy saving scheme, which has been developed at that time, supported an upgrade of around 88,000 of homes, and it has created 5,000 jobs each year from 2009 to 2011. So maybe now all what is said before, what I said is about the quantitative aspect of it, but the Green Deal in itself, it's not only about quantity, it's also about quality. And quality, to my perspective, but I think it's very well shared, is about people. And it's about leaving no one behind. And it's also about how fairly are distributed all this benefit, this quantitative benefit of climate change policies across the population. This is actually why at the EEA we have started a work a few months ago looking about the different climate change policies, mitigation policies, and what are the impact, the social impact of these policies, and how the benefit and the cost distributes across the population. And I would say that, well, so we did scan quite a lot of different mitigation policy types. And one conclusion is like actually most of the climate mitigation policies are likely to result in negative distributional outcome. But very interesting result is like when we look at energy efficiency in buildings, it appears that this particular policy type for reducing emission is an exception in this landscape. Actually, energy efficiency in buildings, or policies to support this energy efficiency in buildings, tend to bring higher benefits to lower income households than to households with higher income. And therefore, they tend to contribute to reduce income inequalities. This is the characteristic of so-called progressive policies. The reason for this fact is because energy efficiency improvement allow to save on the energy bills in the medium long term, and they have the potential, this policy, to be progressive because lower income groups in average spends a more important share of their budget on energy bill than higher level income groups. So when you decrease the energy bill of the lower income groups, then they benefit proportionally more than higher income groups. And we also look at the non-monetary benefit, and in particular on benefit in terms of health and living comfort. And here again, evidence, okay, I have to say that actually there is less evidence on how distribute these non-monetary benefits. So there is more uncertainty than regarding the economic benefits or in terms of income distribution. Nevertheless, what we can say with the evidence we have is like also it's the same. The lowest income groups benefit proportionally more of health benefits and improved living comfort than higher income groups. This is because, in average, lower income groups are initially more exposed to environmental hazards in general, hazards due to pollutions, air pollution in indoor, outdoor, but also humidity and temperature. And beyond this aspect, we also found out from social scientists result that energy efficiency or energy efficient houses tend to change the daily life of people in many different ways, and in particular for the lowest income groups, because they bring some better mental health, lower anxiety, less depression. It's also due to the fact that there is a lower frequency of moving from house to house connected with better energy efficient housing. There is also a connection of improved school and work attendance connected to energy efficiency in housing, and lower social exclusion and isolation. So I think in particular in this situation we are now, the crisis, the COVID crisis and the economic and social crisis which is connected to this pandemic, it's some of these aspects are very important to recall. And I would say that we don't talk only about energy and climate mitigation here. We are much at a higher level, I would say. We talk about long-term development problems, human development issue, and we also talk about adaptation to climate change. These are all co-benefit of energy efficiency policies. I try to go to the next slide, but I think it's not working now. I don't know why, but my next slide is about what we discussed internally in a workshop we had at the EEA 3 weeks ago. We discussed the result I have shown before, and some of the questions were okay, but how this potential distributive effect could really realize, and what kind of barrier we should be careful and highlight. And two key barriers were actually popped up during the discussion. The first one is the intensity of support for energy efficiency, which should be adjusted by income level. Otherwise, there is still a risk that lower household income level still be disadvantaged compared to higher income level groups of people. And the accessibility, and I think that was something also an aspect which was mentioned already by Maxime in the introduction. Accessibility is crucial, in particular for lower income level groups of people, like complex web system or financial transfer. It implies always a risk of non-take and of low transparency for the population. Of course, the context is very different depending on countries, eastern countries, or let's say rural areas, and for instance, much lower rate of access to internet, especially for lowest income groups. And I would say maybe another comment, and very important, I think, in the context of this conference, is that the policy support offered should target the decrease of energy dependency of low-income groups. And this supports to decrease energy dependency of people, actually. It needs to target the deep renovation, because this is the only way to ensure that on the long term, you reduce significantly the energy bill of people and of household, and then you decrease significantly the exposure of people to energy cost. Meaning, because deep renovation, it's by nature reducing very significantly the energy consumption, and therefore very significantly the energy bill. All the small stuff which can be done like separately one by one does not bring enough decrease in energy bill to be able to solve issue related to energy poverty and dependency on energy of household. Maybe some aspect where we have to be aware of, and which should be probably more developed and analyzed in the future. The context schema, which may exclude lower income groups, is still an issue, and in particular because tenant and landlord are not in the same situation, and very often, of course, the tenant belongs to lower group of income, whereas the landlord might benefit more of the enhanced value of property when they are better insulated. The rebound effect is also an issue, because the lowest level income level groups tend to, let's say, be more subject to the rebound effect, even if we are all subject to it. And there are also some excessive, I mean, we see also now in some countries some health aspect connected to excessive insulation. But I want to now go to the next slide. If I can go to the next slide. That's the takeaway, maybe. Yes. Just to recall a few of what I said. So we have an increasing number of evidences suggesting that the wider economic benefits of energy efficiency investment are huge. If well-designed policies to support people in investing energy efficiency have the potential to be progressive, and then to participate or to contribute to the reduction of inequalities, in general, income inequalities, but also environmental inequalities. And this is very important. I think somebody mentioned already the Yellow Jacket movement in France. This is directly related to this kind of social issue, and this is directly related to the social acceptability of climate change mitigation policies. What is very missing and what should be maybe done systematically, it's to really show how the benefit of energy efficiency are, and the wider benefit is to assess systematically in the policies the non-monetary benefits of energy efficiency. This is something which is very missing. And I would say for as a final word, addressing energy poverty is essential. Energy efficiency is a tool for that. Deep renovation is a vehicle for that. And keep in mind that it's around 34 million of European people who are not able to keep their warm in 2018. Thank you.
I think that Dr. Yamina Saheb, I'm going to give the floor to, is going to emphasize those guiding principles for having the European building renovated. Dr. Yamina Saheb is senior researcher at Lausanne University and WiRE fellow at Münster University. Prior to this, Yamina was leading the building research program at the European Commission's Joint Research Center and at the International Energy Agency. Yamina is currently a lead author of the building chapter of the upcoming IPCC report. Yamina, I'm giving you the floor.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction and thank you for the opportunity of joining this timely event. I don't know if you see my slides. I don't see them. So I don't see my slide. Maybe if you could, okay, I see the slide. So I look at two energy policies from the Paris Climate Agreement perspective, and I worked for several years on building policies and more specifically on EU building policies. So we have two things to keep in mind. We have our international commitment, which are two commitments. Here I highlight only the Paris Agreement, but there is another commitment, which is the Sustainable Development, our commitment under Sustainable Development Goals framework. So from Paris Climate Agreement, what happened was that in 2015, you all know that our countries were so delighted to have the agreement signed, but I'm not sure that policymakers realized what they signed on. Because the Paris Agreement means that we should introduce the 1.5 degree target, or emphasize more the 1.5 degree target was introduced a bit earlier. What the 1.5 degree target means was translated into carbon budget 3 years later by the IPCC 1.5 degree report. And this report gives us the carbon budget that is left. And based on this carbon budget that is left, we can calculate, and this is what I did here, we can calculate how much time we have ahead of us to avoid the ecological and climate collapse that we all know is going to happen if we don't act swiftly and in very ambitious way. And we know that, so based on these calculations, we know that 2028, we have approximately 7 years, starting if we consider from this year, 2028, this is where the global carbon budget will be depleted. This is one of our international commitments, and we keep in Europe and in France as well talking about the Paris Agreement. However, when we look at to our policies, so for example today, the renovation wave, it's not yet policy, it's for the time being just a communication, so it's not binding. The renovation wave was introduced by the European Commission in 2020. This is a welcome initiative. However, we cannot say that the renovation wave is Paris compliant or is going to make Europe's building Paris compliant, and this is where we have an issue. The renovation wave introduced two objectives, as mentioned by the previous speakers: doubling the renovation rates, without giving the exact figure. So doubling the renovation rate, which renovation are we talking about? If we are talking about what is called deep renovation, which is, I will come back to this concept, it's completely wrong from technical and scientific perspective to talk about deep renovation. We need something that we can measure, and the only thing that we can measure is zero renovation. If we have a standard for zero renovation, like we have it in the EPPD for new buildings, then we can measure and we can see the real impact of our policies. With the current deep renovation concept, we cannot measure anything and we cannot know what's going on actually. But the deep renovation, according to the report from the Court of Auditors, is around 0.2%. Actually, this is the figure that was considered in the communication from the European Commission. And this communication considers 220 million building units. So this means that the current renovation rate is around 440,000. Doubling this renovation rate means 880,000 building units renovated every year. At the same time, the same communication on the renovation wave aims by doubling the renovation rate, so which is only 880,000 building units renovated every year. I don't know by which magic, because mathematically it doesn't work. We will reach by 2030 35 million building units renovated. I assume that these 35 million building units would be deeply renovated, because it would be a shame if today, as Europeans, we still consider maintenance of buildings as energy renovation. So this would mean, if we have 35 million buildings renovated by 2030, this would mean that we have every year to renovate 3.5 million in this period, in this decade, in the 10 years, 3.5 million building units per year, and not 880,000 building units per year. So doubling the renovation rate just will not allow us to reach the target that is set in the renovation wave communication. So what we see here is that the first thing that we need to do is to have figures that are consistent in our communication and in our various policy instruments. This is not the case. And then what we see also is that 35 million building units per year renovated by 2030 is not enough for the Paris Agreement, because actually, given that we have approximately 7 years ahead of us, this means that we should renovate 33 million building units per year. So it's not 35 million by 2030, it's 33 million right now per year. The question is, can we do that? And the question is more about how to do that than about can we do that, because we always can do if we decide to do. And the COVID-19 is gives us the evidence that policymakers can do when they decide to do. And in the case of the renovation, it's not happening because there is no decision to make it happen. And what we learned from we could consider that we have almost 30 years of experience in renovating if we consider the starting point, the first KfW program. So from all these experiences in EU countries, we learned that what we are doing is wrong, but we do not acknowledge that it's wrong. And this is, I think, the first step is to acknowledge that we have learned a lot in the last 30 years from our mistakes, and now we stop doing these mistakes. And I think the French Citizen Climate Convention gave a lesson to researchers, to policymakers, to decision makers, to industry. They had the courage to say that we need to make energy renovation mandatory. And they are right. All the figures, however you take them, however you manipulate them, do not lead to a building stock, an EU building stock renovated by 2050. It's impossible with what we are doing today. It's impossible if we do not make energy renovation mandatory. Where it's not enough, of course, to say we make it mandatory. We also need to, I don't know if I move to the next slide. Can you please move me to the next slide? Yeah, so we need to make energy renovation mandatory, And making it mandatory is not enough. We need to be clear that it's not deep renovation. We are not going to negotiate. If it's 58% energy savings or 60% or 85%, because we cannot monitor that. We need something that is that we could monitor, and the only thing that we could monitor is zero. And you don't need a PhD to understand that you have zero in your meter. And we know this from Energy Sprong project, different applications of the Energy Sprong methodology. And this is something that it's something like that. It's an industrialization process that we need to go towards. And the COVID-19 make buildings, and especially residential buildings, make it clear that make it clear how important are residential buildings for EU citizens. It's not just about energy poor people, it's about all citizens. We are all locked down, we homeschool, we telework, we do everything from our houses now. And that's why it's very important to renovate the EU building stock. And it's not just from environmental perspective, we need to look at it as a societal and industrial project. And this is what is missing. So far, we have been looking to energy renovation of buildings only from environmental perspective, and within the environmental perspective, we have been looking to it only from the energy efficiency perspective, which is very, very narrow scope. This scope is leading us to a disaster, and I was pleased to hear Maxime from Ademe saying that they are considering sufficiency measures in Ademe pathways. Without sufficiency measures, we cannot reduce the energy demand of buildings. Energy efficiency does not do that. Energy efficiency reduces the consumption, but if you have more square meters than what you need, so you will be consuming anyway more than what you need to consume. So how to move from the current vision to an industrialized vision? I think we should to look at to our successful industries, or that were successful. I know in these days we cannot, aviation is not considered as a good example. However, aviation industry is one of the industries that has been the most efficient in optimizing the overall system. And I like the example of Airbus A380. When it was designed, the project was the first 6 months they did not really move in the project, but as it's an industrial project, they cannot fail for years and just keep presenting about the project. So they changed completely the structure of the project, and they put in place financial operations. So basically, they put in place a renovation, an Airbus company, instead of having just project. This would be equivalent in the case of buildings to an energy renovation facilitator or an agency, which should be, I think, at a regional level, because the renovation is in most EU countries taken care at a regional level, and this would allow to access regional funds. And then we need to bundle all the existing finance. And I did calculations for France and Germany in the past, and I realized that 3 years ago, in France and Germany, we don't need more public money. We did not need more public money, because currently in France they reduced the public support. We did not need more public money. However, we needed to use this public money differently. So it's a question of good governance. It goes beyond energy efficiency. And to do that, we need to have, like in Airbus, they had financial operations, and we could call this a risk-sharing facility or a fund or whatever. But we need to put all the money, to be able to put all the money available, the public money available for energy innovation in one box. And then we need engineering and architecture firms that are different from the facilitator and different from the risk sharing, the financial part. And we need companies, we need industry to wake up. The EU industry is in sleeping mode. It is lagging behind. It's not an industrialized industry anymore. A few years ago, I was asked in 2016, I think, by industry, what do I mean as a researcher by industrialization, energy innovation? I got shocked, because I thought I would learn from industry about industrialization. They were asking me what I would mean by industrialization. At that time, Energy Sprong was not as advanced as today, so people couldn't see what I was talking about. But today we have enough experience experience to do what we should be doing, instead of the continuation in doing what we have always done. And my fear today is not really about the renovation way, because it's communication. It does not have, it's not legally binding instrument. It's good to have such communication from the Commission, but it's not legally binding instrument. The legally binding instrument for buildings is the Energy Performance of Building Directive. And my fear, I was looking to the consultation results, and what you see is that there is a coalition asking for introducing minimum energy performance standards for buildings and building passport. What does that mean? It means that it's an overtime renovation, making overtime renovation binding. This would mean that we will never renovate Europe. And instead of that, and my fear is that the coalition is lobbying so good about it that it might well be in the EPPD if we don't have more voices like the French Citizen Initiative waking up and calling the EU and other policymakers and national policymakers to stop locking Europe's buildings in carbon and locking EU citizens in energy poverty. Over to you.
Yamina, we're going to take questions at the end of this discussion, but maybe we can have reactions from our panelists to the very interesting views that you have just given, Yamina. I don't know if Adrian or Peter, Kristina, Bettina, Stéphane would like to ask a question, a direct question, and discuss a few points with Yamina. On that presentation, of if we want us to deal with it in the Q&A session at the end of it with the questions from the audience. Is anyone willing to ask a question?
Adrian Joyce here.
Yeah, Adrian.
Yeah, thank you, Yamina, for outlining that visionary proposal for how we can face this massive challenge. And I have known Yamina, of course, for many years, and I admire her work. Her intellectual honesty is above reproach. And indeed, listening just shows what the extent of the challenge is that we're facing in Europe. And I do agree with her that it would be wonderful if we can make this a socio-industrial challenge and take a fresh look at how we can reorganize the construction sector in order to be better prepared for the renovation challenge that lies ahead. Of course, the Renovate Europe campaign itself has been calling for an 80% reduction in energy demand of the building stock by 2050 compared to 2005 already for 10 years. So we're very well aware how difficult it is to move the dial. But at the same time, we have precisely the same ambition as Yamina, meaning that we also wish to see the building stock transformed, and that's the right word, transformed, being highly energy efficient and decarbonized, so zero carbon by 2030. That is in the European Directive on Buildings, that is now a requirement in law for member states. We do also notice that member states have tended in the past to be very cool on introducing regulation to stimulate the market. And our hope now, part of that coalition that Yamina referred to, calling for minimum energy performance standards, but part of our hope is that the introduction of those standards will help to wake up society and the different segments of society to the urgency of the challenge we face, because without an obligation, it looks like we never move within the construction sector.
No.
So I would just make those few words. Yamina, yeah, tell me.
Yeah. It will be great if we could have Renovate Europe campaigning for zero energy renovation. Because if you introduce maps, we have only one round left to renovate our building stock. If you introduce a map to the maps today, so basically the EPPD, it will be in implementation stage around 2027. And you remember my first slide, I showed that 2028 is the last year for the carbon budget that is left for the 1.5 degree target. So basically, it's too late. If we would have done this 30 years ago, that would have been okay. But today, introducing MEPs means that you lock building stock in carbon, and you lock poor people in energy poverty, and you do all that using public finance. Of course, individuals are free to lock themselves in carbon. That's their freedom. But the main issue here is that the energy renovation market in the EU exists only because we have the public finance. It did not exist before the public finance. So that's why it's a question of good governance. It's misuse of public finance. So what would be good is to have the Renovate Europe campaign explaining that MEPs is not the right way today.
We lost the sound.
Do you hear me?
We can hear you. Sorry, we can hear you.
Yeah, so there is no time left for overtime renovation. And MEPs, I am sorry, MEPs, building passport, staged renovation, deep renovation, and you see, you mentioned 80%. The communication from the Commission refers to 60%, so we will never reach an agreement. We don't know what's going on. Staged deep renovation, all these expressions have exactly the same role. They all delay climate action, and they all have societal impact because we are aging population, and we see it with COVID, and we will see after COVID, we will have more data very soon to show the societal impact of COVID through buildings on the EU population. That's why mandatory zero energy renovation, because then we are sure to have it in the EPPD. You are those who could make the EPPD a success.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. We're gonna keep on the conversation with our second panel now, focusing on financing issues and operationality. So I'm going to give floor to Peter Sweatman. Peter is Chief Executive of Climate Strategy and Partners. Peter advises governments and companies in the energy transition to net zero. He is rapporteur to the Energy Efficiency Financial Institutions Group. The EEFIG was established in 2013 by the European Commission and the United Nations Environment Programme Finance Initiative, UNEP FI, and has over 300 members working in structured groups addressing the key financial regulatory areas. I'm giving you the floor, Peter.
So thank you very much, Luca, and thank you to the team at Agir pour le Climat, Ademe, the French government, for inviting me to join your timely discussion and for the promotion of the buildings renovation crisis. I've noticed if we don't refer to things as a crisis these days, then people don't take the relevant action. So we heard that the EU's renovation wave strategy calls for the energy efficient renovation of 35 million buildings in the next decade, with an estimated total investment need of nearly €1 trillion, 900 billion. And Yamina has very eloquently just called for almost this amount annually in a buildings race to zero. This requires a more than doubling of the headline buildings renovation rate of around 1% per annum. And as Adrian so well described, today, just 1/5 of buildings renovations are designed to deliver substantial energy savings, meaning over 60%. It is indeed necessary to ensure that all buildings renovations deliver substantial energy savings. We're being in a race to zero energy buildings, and to double the overall number, more than double the overall number of these renovations to zero. I don't know if you can put up my slides, but now would be the time. Thanks. So the energy performance of most buildings in Europe is poor, and this doesn't have to be the case. 3/4 of European buildings were built before construction codes even considered energy performance. These older buildings are a legacy that will remain standing well beyond the point at which our economy needs to be emissions negative. Thank you, Adrian, Stéphane, and Yamina, for so clearly setting the scene for this existential crisis in our buildings. In 1947, US General Marshall might have outlined his response, the Renovate Flagship Challenge, call it, in the context of our generation's European Recovery Plan in 3 simple steps. Firstly, identification. Secondly, financing. Thirdly, execution. Working with policy support from EU institutions and recovery funding, member states will need to match the right people in the right buildings to the right projects with the right mix of grants and finance to ensure that renovation is done right. So, my 3 steps. The first step is identification. We need to identify renovation wave target buildings that require a combination of 2 criteria. The first is a building's physical state, and the second is the occupant's eligibility for funding or financial support through grants, loans, and/or tax breaks. The general information on the physical state and occupancy of buildings is good. The age, state, occupancy, ownership, fuel use, inter alia of Europe's buildings are described in member states' national long-term renovation strategies in aggregate. But how many of us know, how many of the buildings owners or renovation decision makers or small construction firms know this? And if they do they know how to contract for a renovation, how much it will cost, and whether they can get public support for it, and if so, how to do that? Energy performance certificates that have been around since 2002 are a partial answer to this lack of physical data, and they make buildings' performance more visible at sale or rental times particularly. Nevertheless, only 11 member states upload their energy performance certificates to a public database, and far fewer of these are made available to owners and to the renovation industry. Best practices in this, however, can be found in the Netherlands, who have produced visualization tools and who provide financial institutions with apps, or financial institutions who have provided apps to their customers. And there are countries that provide certified renovation professionals confidential access to buildings' energy data so that they can help buildings owner understand when we talk about a race to zero energy buildings, what we're saying. Vulnerable communities, the energy poor, and communities in transition need to be identified by competent local authorities through a nationwide exercise of priority identification through transparent grant eligibility criteria. Transparency is critical, as these grants can just be only one component of the renovation funding package in most cases. Step 2 is financing. Today, many building renovations are self-financed. Home improvements, boiler replacements are simply funded from savings accounts. However, the deep or to zero renovations identified by the renovation wave will cost the same as a new car, and yet do not benefit from the myriad of competitive lease financing packages that a car dealership can offer you today. Nevertheless, monies will be available from governments to promote deep renovations, for project development, and to part pay for the components whose returns take more time, like insulation. The question is, where is the dealership for home renovations? And are they empowered to offer a fully balanced package of grants and low-cost loans to finance an optimum or zero energy efficient renovation? Successful funders like KfW, who will speak later, in Germany, Credex in Estonia, VIPA in Lithuania, the Czech Renovation Fund, IDAI in Spain, build a trusted network of agents and collaborators who are able to identify qualifying buildings renovation projects, undertake the work, and provide the necessary information to apply for blended financing packages. Germany has a network of over 10,700 government-accredited energy experts that work with the state bank, KfW, and Germany's energy agency, DENA, that can prepare renovation plans. Rather like the concept of an independent financial advisor, these independent renovation advisors and project managers prepare a technical project, and they can arrange the financing and are required to co-sign the loans as a testament to their technical inputs and their interest as a reference in case the project doesn't deliver against the owner's expectations. European residential buildings are estimated to be worth 17 trillion euros, and they are home to 220 million households. There are around 7 trillion of mortgages in Europe. 17 minus 7 is equal to 10. That means that there is 10 trillion of home equity against which homeowners can borrow for deep renovation to convert this equity into savings and local jobs. Borrowing against 10 trillion euros of home equity, often belonging to the older generations, can stimulate, as we've heard, jobs and lower ongoing energy costs. Secured against a green property with nothing to pay except on sale for 30 years as a new financial instrument supported by central banks seems like a road as yet untraveled in mainstream renovation markets and may be a response to General Marshall's call. It's also an intergenerational transfer. The Economist this week published an article showing how low home ownership was among the millennial generation in comparison to the baby boomer generation. The home equity owned by older generations can be converted into jobs for the young to enable us to recover faster as a society together from the pandemic. So, execution, how will this happen? There are very many testimonies to high-quality deep renovations that satisfy their customers. These customers and owners live more comfortably in healthier environments that cost far less or potentially zero to heat and light. Yet the risks of execution hassle and performance delivery remain hard to overcome. The miracle of zero bills, healthy living, and even on-site power production is passed by word of mouth. And in renovation, seeing is still believing. Retail business models expand virally, with growth picking up in renovated communities and, in some countries, by buildings literally changing color. Building renovations have always been slightly ad hoc. The renovation process, business model, and finance supply chain is more complex than in car purchase or mortgage finance. And there are fewer entities that offer pre-financed deep renovation packages in a way that's easy to understand and simple to execute. This is a particular challenge for SMEs, those that employ less than 50 people, and those that organize Europe's 18 million construction workers that contribute 9% to Europe's GDP. You may ask, how many certified renovation project managers in local or regional buildings renovation firms are required to deliver this challenge? Well, if a qualified renovation project manager could deliver 10 deeply or near zero renovated buildings per year, then the renovation wave, as currently described, of 35 million European buildings in a decade will require 350,000 accredited project managers. Just pause to think about that number. Germany today has 10,700. So it appears that maybe this is a capacity bottleneck across countries. Yet if project managers can expect to earn, say, 10% of executed projects, then the size of the market for these project managers is 9 billion euros per annum. That's 9 billion of potential salaries for 350,000 additional people. I would argue that's enough to get training for. Finally, to sell 15 million cars at 30,000 euros each, on average, car companies spend together over 5 billion euros a year on advertising. My team was unable to find clear estimates of market spending for home renovations. But if we need a wave of 3.5 million home renovations sold at 25,000 euros each, on average, each year, significant resources will be required to inform European citizens of the benefits of getting involved. In 1947, at Harvard University, when describing the rehabilitation of Europe, George Marshall said, "The problem is one of such enormous complexity that the very mass of facts presented to the public by press and radio make it exceedingly difficult for the man in the street to reach a clear appraisement of the situation." How prescient he was. As it would seem, he was describing how many Europeans view buildings renovation today. The Marshall Plan didn't seek to provide explicit solutions for Europe's post-war recovery, but it offered jointly developed policy recommendations, co-funding solutions, and aid in a coherent package to stimulate Europe's economy. This is what our buildings renovation wave needs to be. Is it? I'm keen to hear from you on this topic, and I want to know if your home renovation is easily planned, funded, and delivered. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. I think we all know the answer, unfortunately. Bettina is, that's a good transition for Bettina, who will emphasize the role of the pool of German experts that you were talking about, Peter. And the question would be, how could it be replicated across Europe? So Bettina, I'm giving you the floor. Bettina Dorendorf is Vice President of Private and Corporate Clients Division at KfW and Senior Sustainability Manager in charge of KfW's domestic promotional business, covering inter alia sustainable finance as a topic. KfW, for those who don't know, is Germany's people promotional bank and has developed an important promotional program for residential energy efficiency. Bettina?
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, and thank you for inviting KfW to this webinar. I'm quite sure that most of you, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Bettina.
Okay.
In Paris,
So I'm sure that good. Most of you have heard about the domestic flagship program, Energy Efficient Construction and Refurbishment. I will therefore keep my introduction very short and focus my contribution on the role of the energy expert in the deployment of public promotional programs for energy efficiency in the building sector. So KfW is the promotional bank of the Federal Republic of Germany, established in 1948 with now over 70 years of experience and a 100% public shareholder background. The main purpose is to deploy financial support programs on behalf of the federal government. Just to give you an idea on the size, in 2020, the balance sheet volume was 543 billion euros. KfW has approximately 7,000 employees. We benefit from a stable AAA rating, which provides easy access to the capital market and which is due to a guarantee of the Federal Republic. The business areas comprise domestic promotion for private households, SME, public sector clients, as well as international business. This international business is represented on the one hand by the KfW IPEX Bank, the commercial arm of KfW covering international export and project finance, and on the other hand, KfW Development Bank supporting developing countries. The business activities of KfW is based on the megatrends on the challenges stemming from a number of megatrends, which are climate change and environment, globalization, digitalization and innovation, as well as social change. So KfW is working with the mandate of the German government to address these megatrends with suitable promotional programs. So the business volume normally ranges between 75 and 80 billion euros. In 2009 and 2020, there was a record year, which is due to the financial support provided on behalf of the government to fight against the consequences of COVID-19. So in 2020, the promotional volume amounted to 136 billion euros, so a 75% increase against 2019. KfW is deploying almost 50% of its financing to environmental and climate purposes, carving out the COVID support. Financing for energy efficiency in the domestic promotional programs amounted to almost 30 billion euros. This includes the well-known flagship program, Energy Efficient Construction and Refurbishment, with 26 billion euros. So, could you put my slides on, please? Thank you very much. KfW has developed a best practice promotional scheme to finance energy efficiency in the building sector. This is a veritable success story. We have decades of experience in offering customer-oriented promotional products for the building sector in all aspects for residential, commercial and public buildings. Since the inception in 2006, the program has provided support to over 6 million housing units as per end of 2020. And today, more than every second newly built housing unit benefits from the promotional support of KfW. It is internationally regarded as best practice. According to the yearly evaluation of the program, the CO2 emission reduction triggered by the investments financed with the support of the promotional program amounts to more than 12 million tons per year. KfW has developed a market standard, which is called the KfW Efficiency House, indicating a certain level of comprehensive renovation. The standard is based on the current legislation regarding primary energy demand and transmission heat loss in a new building. This is based on the current law on energy in buildings. So as a basic principle, promotion is granted if the degree of efficiency reached with the investment goes significantly beyond the legally required level. So the higher the degree of efficiency, the higher the level of promotion. So in essence, the promotional conditions represent a kind of carrot and stick approach. In my contribution today, I will explain the program. I will not explain the program as such, but focus on the role of the energy expert, which has to be involved in the process of deploying public funds, which has to be involved on a mandatory basis. So I'm using the slide changer, which does not work. Cool, thank you. Okay. Just a few words. As I said, KfW has established the Efficiency House standard, and the deployment of the promotional funds, given that KfW does not maintain its own network of branches, of bank branches, works through an on-lending mechanism, making sure that there is access through a broad network of commercial banks, savings banks, and some insurance companies. So the next slide, please. Thank you. So the mandatory involvement of an energy expert plays a focal role in the application and approval process for obtaining subsidy for energy efficient construction and refurbishment. So Peter already thankfully mentioned this. Since 2012, actually, private customers are obliged to involve an energy expert in the application and approval process. From July 21 onwards, this is mandatory for all customer groups and building types. For this purpose, in 2012, a dedicated pool of independent experts has been created. This pool of experts is managed by the German Energy Agency. At its peak, it had 13,000 experts registered. This is a fluctuating number. There is a dedicated website for those interested in it, energieeffizienzexperten.de. The experts have to pay an annual fee for the membership in this expert pool. Could you kindly change the slide for me? Thank you. So there's a website. This website allows for searching an expert with regard to regional or local characteristics. You can actually type in your postal code and then see which experts are around and which experts are specialized on the building type you would like to renovate as an investor, for instance, residential, non-residential buildings. And some experts are just registered for advising on single measures. The pool of experts is regarded the AAA list of energy experts in Germany because of the high level of professional expertise which is required to become a member of the list. So the minimum precondition is the right to issue energy performance certificate. There is a high share of architects and engineers in the pool, but also handcraftsmen. One important aspect is the fact that these experts have to be independent, in particular when they provide advice for a comprehensive refurbishment program. So the experts have to register, pay a registration fee, pay a yearly membership fee, and they have to relist every 3 years. And this makes sure that over the course of their registration, they maintain a high level of expertise and a high level of professional information with regard to legal and technical aspects on building renovation. In the meantime, the experts have to follow a predefined catalogue of professional trainings. The attendance has to be proven, and this makes sure the knowledge is kept up to date. KfW supports these activities inter alia through its KfW Academy, offering specialized trainings on technical aspects on energy efficiency in the building sector. So, as already said, the reputation of the expert list is very good due to the high professional expectations. How is the expert involved in the investment and finance process? So it has a focal role in the deployment of public funds. The energy expert is providing an important technical assistance to the investor. Before filing an application for public funds, the KfW customer must contact an energy expert. And this energy expert will help planning the efficiency measures, advising the client on the degree of renovation required to obtain a certain level of promotional grants. And the expert is the one who must sign up on the application for promotional funds, confirming that the measures planned are in line with the technical requirements for obtaining a certain promotional support. So, and after implementation of the measures, the expert must check whether the efficiency measures are in line with the planning and as a consequence qualify for the scope of promotional grant support the customer has applied for. he or she will do this by checking invoices, check the implementation or based on photos, and in some cases also by on-site visits. The expert then must provide its signature to confirm the compliance with the technical promotional requirements, and only then the promotional grant element will be booked for the benefit of the customer. If this signature is refused, there will be a kind of recalculation, a deeper check of the actual level of efficiency reached, and eventually adjustment of the level of promotion. With this involvement of the energy expert, several benefits are clearly visible. It creates a win-win situation for the customers or for the investors. The energy in energy efficiency refurbishment, the involvement of the energy expert provides guidance in preparing and implementing the refurbishment project, and this is particularly important for private individuals, condominiums, and SMEs. So how to finance the involvement of the energy expert? It is costly, and in order to make sure that finance does not become an impediment, KfW provides finance for the involvement. So far, a dedicated grant product is covering up to 50% of the costs, so maximum 4,000 euros. And from 1st of July 2021 onwards, where there will be some structural changes in the setup of the German promotional program for building renovation and public support for it. The promotional support for the expert will be an integral part of the promotional finance. It will range between 2,000 and 5,000 euros for single measures and 4,000 euros for comprehensive refurbishment per housing unit for multi-family buildings, with a maximum of 20,000 euros per multi-family building. From the perspective of the public budget, the involvement of the expert assures a high degree of quality of the measures financed with public money, and also guarantees a certain degree of fraud prevention. From the point of view of the energy expert being registered in this dedicated pool, this comes along with further benefits. They gain exclusive access to the large market of KfW-financed efficiency projects. Also, the pool of experts is regarded like a AAA list, and the expert gain visibility and an excellent professional reputation. On top of this, a regular survey carried out by KfW also revealed that the involvement of the energy expert lead to a better understanding of the efficiency project by the investors, often motivating them to opt for even more ambitious efficiency projects. So maintaining this infrastructure is costly and mainly self-financed by the experts after public financial support in the initial phase of setting up the expert list. So let me conclude by saying that the involvement of the energy expert is very beneficial for all parties involved in the process of deploying public funds, and in particular for private households and SMEs, providing the urgently needed support and assistance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bettina, for this detailed presentation of the technical assistance, how it goes in Germany. Just before giving the floor to Kristina, a very quick question. Do you think that this organization, this German organization, can be replicated across Europe? And even though Germany is very advanced in its assistance package, even Germany needs to scale up to reach its climate target in building. So, what is missing in your opinion?
I think it's difficult to say, and I think we, in all European countries, we face more or less the same situation. And it might be surprising that in a country with such a well-organized promotional scheme, the renovation rate still does not meet the expectations. Well, we saw during the year 2020 that there was a sharp increase in demand for energy efficiency loans, in particular for efficient new buildings and also efficient renovation. This was due to a massive increase in the promotional incentive. So we increased the grant element to 40%. So as a customer entering into applying for a 120,000 euros loan for home renovation, for comprehensive home renovation, customers can obtain up to 40% repayment reduction grant, which is more than 30,000 euros. And this very generous incentive has led to a massive increase in demand. So, what does it show? That scaling, increasing the grant element, increasing the financial support has an effect, and also providing technical assistance has a very important effect.
Thank you very much, Bettina. Now turning to Kristina to keep on talking about financing and technical assistance. Kristina is head of advisory and consulting at GNE Finance, a private company based in Spain and in the Netherlands, designing and setting up sustainable renovation programs together with cities and regions. Such programs bring together innovative and affordable financing, technical assistance, and smart funding to ensure that sustainable renovation is accessible to all. Kristina, your turn.
Thank you very much, Lucas. And it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for this invitation. So today I was asked to speak about our experience on the ground and really share the takeaways for home renovation and designing those programs and working together with cities and regions. While the slides are being put up, I'd like to really start from the premise that the majority of homeowners do not want to renovate their homes. And if they do, they're rarely motivated by energy efficiency alone. It's absolutely key to focus on other multiple benefits that were addressed in the earlier panel. And also for every homeowner, renovation is most of all local, and it's a deeply personal business. And the local element of it also creates this local ecosystem to which the homeowner tends to go to. It's the local contractors. And also it's, of course, cities and regions who are at the forefront of this transition. And in this case, just changing the slide, cities and regions really need to play a very strong role in terms of galvanizing their innovation wave, but they cannot do it alone. And it's a challenging task. And so cities and regions also need support from the national government that can push the market to act. And such support can include a number of tools and a number of tools in the toolbox. And one of them could be mandatory requirements or all kinds of mandates. We heard from Yamina earlier where she proposed that the mandates should really focus on net zero. And as a private sector stakeholder, we're a big supporter of mandates because, first of all, they stimulate the market, they create the demand, and they push homeowners to renovate. However, every mandate, every stick has to be also followed by a carrot. And so in this case, the example of fiscal incentives is really key. And we have a great example from Italy, also cited earlier by Adrian Joyce, and that was specifically the eco bonus and the super bonus that gives 110% fiscal credit offered to all building owners by the Italian government on specific energy efficiency renovation measures. And lastly, a couple of words about grants and subsidies. They can create market distortions. and actually lower demand for renovation. So it's very important to optimize the use of subsidies and grants and to create long-term programs and long-term schemes. And again, coming back to fiscal incentives, because these tools can really help leverage private funding. And we heard just earlier from Bettina to learn about how grants are used in the KfW program to actually stimulate demand rather than to create this waiting game of citizens waiting when the new grant is released, either by the city or by the national government. So overall, I think today's session really made it clear that renovation wave is calling for massive action. And one thing is also clear, that this action cannot be achieved by the public sector alone. That while the public sector can certainly provide lots of things, the public sector can provide leadership, trust, public funding, grants, subsidies, fiscal incentives, and set key policies to move the market. By the private sector is equally important, as it can have more experience and proven track record, specifically in demand generation. And that's often the missing piece of the puzzle. Because again, coming back to my first statement, that homeowners are not typically motivated to renovate. And also the customer experience is absolutely important. In renovation, it's still a relatively young market. I mean, if we look at other industries, customer experience and actual sales and marketing has been a lot more developed. And that's also going back to Peter's point about car companies using excessive amounts of money to actually market their product. And so we see very little of that done in renovation. And here again, I have to point out that many public one-stop shops or home renovation programs still focus on information providing and awareness raising, when we need to make a massive switch to marketing and sales rather than just information providing. And in this realm, I also want to mention that the market needs to attract private players to really develop effective and economically sustainable programs that can actually scale the market. And such programs can be put together with both expertise of the public and private sector. And I'll be a bit controversial here and also say that sometimes it's actually not fully clear if the public administration is a partner or a competitor, because we're receiving mixed signals from the public administrations. There are fully public one-stop shops that cannot attract private players, that also cannot even subcontract private activities, and plus there are public players who have access to various guarantees and financing incentives, while the private sector doesn't. So the point I want to make here is that the public sector clearly cannot do it alone, and we all agree about this. However, the rules of the games are not fully incentivizing the private sector to come into the fold. So we need to keep that in mind, that if there is really needs to be a cooperation, then we must have a more level playing field. And of course, coming back to the financing element of it, it is very clear that we have also a tremendous investment gap. It's been pointed out by speakers before me, and we must attract private capital through the smart use of public funds. And this private capital can help, public funding can help support or alleviate the technical assistance costs, because project development is still a very complex business, and it takes time and it takes resources. Public money can also help and should be used to create credit enhancement instruments to bring private capital, institutional investors to massively enter into this market and to increase the funding for innovation. So far, it didn't quite happen. And additionally, I also want to mention that innovative financing options should be considered alongside a menu of other options. There is not one financing that works for all citizens, and there is not one financing tool that will solve the whole problem. And earlier, Peter also spoke about bank loans and about how much we need to include banks and actually stimulate them to enter into this market even more. And I want to highlight the home-based financing, or financing that is specifically attached to a property and not an individual. And currently, there is one example that we've been testing in Spain, and there is a national law amendment that's currently pending in Spain. And this mechanism, home-based financing, is inspired by PACE financing, pioneered in the US, Australia, and Canada. And just going to the next and last slide here. all of these takeaways that I've been sharing today are first of all coming from our work on the ground, mostly in Spain, and our experience setting up public-private partnerships together with several cities and regional governments. And above all, we focus on the renovation formula that brings together technical assistance, customer support, supports around the whole renovation process, affordable financing, and lastly, public funding or the smart funding to create trust in renovation. So essentially what we're bringing here to the table is really tools and the financing to scale the renovation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kristina. Before picking a few questions from the audience, maybe panelists would like to discuss some points with other panelists. Please raise your hand if you want to do so. Okay. All right. So Peter, we'll start with you, Peter.
Thank you, Luca. Thank you, Kristina. I actually wrote my question in the chat. I don't know. Can you hear me? Gone quiet.
Here in Paris, but I'm not sure that Kristina can hear you.
Okay. Okay, good. So you had a slide, Kristina, where you said renovation is local. And as you talked about that, I thought to myself, is it? I think it's personal. So I think trusted technical experts need to talk to homeowners about zero energy target renovations backed by an app, because we do things on our phones and we do things with respect to our homes. We have people in them fixing them, and we have to leave them. We have to trust those people more so than we trust, I don't know, people who sell us an object and we take it home. Maybe as we now visit the doctor, during COVID, I visit the doctor by video phone. I hold up my phone, the doctor's there, I book an appointment, I talk to. Maybe we need to do the same for the health of our homes. I think home renovation is like waiting for a vaccination. Sooner or later, your home gets the call, right? So over the next 10 to 20 years, we should be expecting to get a call, you know, to say your home's up, you got to go in, get it renovated. Literally, you know, the way we think about vaccination, all of us know that we're waiting for that moment when we get a call from our local health service that's going to tell us, book your slot, go in, get your vaccination. We should think the same. Everybody should think the same about homes. We all do conferences like this, but we all live in homes. How many of us can put their hands up and say, we know where the app is, we know how to get a renovation, we know how to do a video call with two experts that are going to tell us how much it's going to cost, where the funds are? None of us know that. That's what we need. It's personal.
Thank you, Peter. Kristina, you wanted to add something, or?
Sure, no, I couldn't agree more. Renovation is always personal, and we have to approach it from a customer perspective. What does the customer want? And way too much we've been approaching it from a building perspective. And the question of what does the building need is incredibly important. But at the same time, when we're selling renovation to people every day, you know, one to one, it must be personal. And I love the idea of the app. And I also visited a doctor online, and it's possible and it's doable, and we can do it with renovation as well. And there's so many wonderful digital tools that can even allow us to use a phone and actually go and do a walkthrough audit and share it with the professionals and share even the sizes of the buildings. There is technology, there are tools, we have the knowledge, let's do it.
Thank you, Kristina. Bettina, you were raising your hand.
Yes, one remark and one question. So one remark, I think, Peter, it's personal, but at the same time, regional or even local, home renovation. And one question to Yamina. Yamina, I like the way how you, a bit provocative, said that all public funds are actually spent not in the optimal manner, to put it politely. So could you outline in a few words, how do you think that the public funds should be spent better, and be a bit more precise than in your initial statements?
Yes. So basically, I I consider that public money is not spent in the right way, because public money is spent for step-by-step renovation and not and for what we the concept of deep renovation that is not that does not mean too much, that we cannot monitor actually. So we don't know when we calculate, for example, the studies on the cost effectiveness of KfW scheme. Everything is about deemed savings and not real measurement, because we don't have zero energy target. To spend public money as we should be spending public money, because it's a responsibility, we should stop funding step-by-step renovation, single measures, and we should use public money only for zero energy renovation, with monitoring of the renovation work. So, if I am not mistaken, the KfW scheme, when it started at the beginning, did not include single measures. And for me, as an analyst and as a citizen, even if I don't pay taxes in Germany, I feel sorry to see that KfW evolved towards single measures, funding single measures. Because single measures do not lead us to decarbonize building stock, and in the case of the energy poor people, it does not. It locks them in energy poverty, and maybe it's not. This is this is how I see it actually. And maybe one last point, because now we have at the EU level, we have since, I think it's from 2016 or 17, we have. I don't know what is the exact status of this instrument. It's called the European pillar for social pillar, the European social pillars actually. And one of them is about providing, it's number 20, it's about providing, making the access to the services, to energy services right for all citizens. And basically we should look at it from this perspective when we are using public money. Thank you. I hope it answers your question, Bettina.
Thank you very much, Yamina.
Okay. Anyone else, sorry, has questions, or can we go to the questions from the audience? Is there someone else wanting to add something at this point? A question, someone? No? Raise your hand if so. Okay, so we're going to start with a few questions from the audience. Maybe a first one for Kristina about the role of banks. What should be the role of banks in the financing of the deep renovation of housing? Why don't they engage in the energy renovation market, and how to get them on board?
Thank you very much for the question. Banks are, in fact, engaging, still, of course, not at a massive scale that we need in order to scale their innovation. But we've recently done a study, and we looked at energy efficiency financing tools coming from the banking sector in both Spain and the Netherlands. And there is some choice there, but still what we're seeing is the energy efficiency loans are not long-term enough, and they're not attractive enough to homeowners. And also, the main reason that we're seeing that there is not enough volume yet is that because banks typically don't originate energy efficiency or renovation projects. And so one of the things that we're now testing is engaging with several banks and bringing them together to one-stop shop, so that a homeowner actually has a choice, and they have a choice of which financing to go with. They can, if there is an option of an innovative financing tool, they can use that if that suits them, or they can choose which energy efficiency loan from which bank to go with. A lot of it, of course, has to do with trust, as we're learning and talking to homeowners. Sometimes they're more willing to go even with a slightly more expensive loan, but from the same bank where they already have a mortgage, or the same bank that they trust, that they know, etc. So I do think it's very much important for banks to be talking to the originators of the energy efficiency renovation projects, and to engage with originators and to work together with them. And whether that originator is a public or private entity, and then create that more virtuous ecosystem where there is one centralized body and it's connecting both the supply side, so the whole architects, engineers, and contractors, and connects the financing side as well to the homeowner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kristina. And another one linked to that matter, maybe for Peter. Why deep renovation loans are not requalified as housing loans? Their term are longer and their rates lower.
Yeah, thanks for the question. And I think this relates also to the role of banks. So banks have a cost of funds which is higher than governments. And the European Commission has a cost of funds that is lower than national governments together. The Commission has said it was going to raise a significant amount of new EU-level debt to fund the recovery. Last time I looked, if the Commission launched a 30-year bond, its interest rate may be close to zero. So the idea which I'm working on is to see if we can channel loans, European renovation loans, at zero coupon, which is slightly different from zero interest rate, meaning you just don't pay any cash component for 30 years. Now, these can be channeled through banks, not issued from banks' balance sheets. That's a different thing. So what we need from banks, in my opinion, is we need banks to be retail channels for government-backed, zero-coupon, long-term European renovation loans. That means that as a citizen, you would be offered a deep renovation without having to pay anything for 30 years. That European renovation loan will be secured on your property against the home equity which you in 30 years will have in that property. You will like that because you'll get, in essence, for free, something that you don't pay on for 30 years, during which time your home's value, if homes continue to increase in value at the rate that they have since the beginning of time, will cover. So in essence, that feels to me like a win-win-win. The people who will get paid from that will be the people doing the work, the banks as a processing fee for passing through essentially what amounts to European money to European citizens, and the SMEs comprising the renovation sector will do the renovation work. And the citizen will see cash positive savings and greater comfort and multiple benefits immediately from day one. So to me, very simply, that should be the European renovation loan. And that should be the way in which the European Central Bank spends its recovery-backed money.
Thanks very much, Peter. This resembles one proposal by French deputies, Vallot and Bricout, what you're saying that you don't pay anything until the building changes hand. Another question, maybe for Adrian, more technical, or Yamina, maybe Adrian. Is it taken into account that the increase of summer heat waves is a main subject in renovations, besides the energy saving and the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Indeed, the question of summer cooling is one that we hear a great deal about. And as the impacts of climate change begin to be felt more and more in a shorter time frame, it will become more pertinent moving forward. But indeed, it has to be recalled that major energy efficiency measures to a building envelope are largely built around making that envelope more insulated. And insulation keeps the cold out in the winter and the heat out in the summer. But what is important, and it's a technical question indeed, is to ensure that we have adequate shading in the summertime. So passive shading that would prevent overheating. And it is something that is not maybe technically taken into account adequately in building design these days, because it hasn't been a problem in the past. When it comes to the energy use for air conditioning systems, which might have been in the questioner's mind, that portion of energy use in buildings is still very small today, in single percentage, but will grow in the future if we do not do the right kinds of energy renovation moving forward. So yes, summer overheating effects must be accounted for and can be addressed by renovation of buildings. Back to you, Luca.
Thanks very much, Adrian. Maybe, Yamina, you wanted to add something on this matter? I don't know.
I agree with what Adrian said, except that in the current renovation work that we see, summer is not at all considered as a priority. And so it may lead to an increase of cooling demand that we could avoid if upfront, when we are working on the renovation work, we consider at the same time winter and summer comfort. It's very important because of the global warming, but it's also very important because of the aging population, because the temperature of the body changes and the need for cooling areas is more important when we are older. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Yamina. Maybe a question for Stéphane. Do we have data on the level of what you said were significant energy savings by renovation work? Do we have detail on energy saving expected?
Yes, to me. It's a question about the data. Actually, it's a very good question because the European Environment Agency is very involved at the EU level for the production of information and data and figures. In the EEA, we collect mainly, most of the environmental information which is available and which is aggregated at EU level is coming through the EEA and is actually transmitted by the member state to the EEA. Regarding energy statistics, purely energy statistics, this is not the EEA which is in charge of this data collection. This is the statistical office of the European Commission, which is Eurostat. But of course, we work in close collaboration with them because we need this disaggregation of data. And very recently, good progress has been made in the disaggregation of data, and in particular, the final consumption by household. And more detailed data is available on this aspect, which is very useful for the work we do here. And all this is available on the Eurostat website. And maybe yes, we also rely quite a lot on another data source, which is Odyssey, and in particular for the let's say the saving in terms of energy, thanks to energy efficiency improvement. I think Ademe knows very well this Odyssey database because Ademe is actually leading this initiative, which is a European one also, and that provides harmonized data at the European level. And maybe I can say also one word about the previous question related to the cooling aspect. Actually, cooling aspect is also something, it's a concern. What is a very concern at the level of the EEA is also health and adaptation to climate change and this energy efficiency aspect. And hopefully we will have interesting output of a work which is just starting now, where we want to look at this nexus between health, adaptation, and mitigation. And when talking about mitigation, it's about cooling, and it's related to, of course, quite a lot of southern countries in the EU. But overheating is also, and I did mention it very quickly in my presentation, is also an issue we see in the Nordic countries in the summertime, and in particular, and that's also a paradox, in buildings which are very well insulated, but as it was said just before, where this issue of shading has not been taken into consideration initially in the in the configuration of the building. Back to you, Adrian.
Maybe one last question. It would be for Yamina or Maxime, if he is still with us, because it's still in with France. Before people can renovate a building, they need training, which is more complex for a deep renovation. Does France have the necessary training programs in place? Are they training now? But I think that the question is worth as well for all the countries throughout across Europe. So it could be a question to Adrian as well. Yamina, if you wanted to say something on this, or Maxime, or Adrian. Thank you.
Yeah, I can say a few words about France and a little bit about the EU. So we have at the French level different training programs. So we have, for example, Doremi, which was initiated bottom-up approach to upgrade the skills, to renovate buildings, to do one-shot renovation with the workers, actually. So it seems that it's working well, but it's not enough. That's the main point. What we have is not enough. We have something, but it's not enough. And then at the EU level, we have the Build Up Skills initiative, which is an initiative launched by the Commission a few years ago. And it's the same story. What we have from Build Up Skills, it's not enough. And it's not really what we need, because, for example, in the Build Up Skills, I checked the program 2 years ago, and there was nothing about industrialization of energy renovation. And when I asked why there was nothing there, he said there was no need. It was not on the table at all. So I think the Commission, the plan was to extend or to have build-up skills 2 bis or something like that. I did not follow up this. So we have something, but it's not enough, and it's not always what is needed. And yes, we need to train and to upgrade the skills. It's very urgent to have this, and it should be part of the use of the public finance dedicated to energy innovation. Over to you.
Adrian, maybe you wanted to add something on this matter?
Yeah, I can supplement to say that indeed the Build Up Skills 2 program has got underway, and that in addition there's now what's called the construction blueprint at European level, which is more aware of the needs for training for renovation. I mean, but it is across the construction sector as a whole. And there is a new alliance emerging here in Brussels called the Construction 2050 Alliance, which has also raised the need for special training for construction workers, construction professionals, to better understand the dynamics of the renovation process. Indeed, what Yamina said about industrialization of the process isn't directly covered to my knowledge. And I would finally say that our own partner, the EEFIG, the European Federation of Building and Woodworkers, are very aware of this need and have programs with their members who are national federations, trade unions rather, for upskilling workers for the needs of the renovation challenge. Back to you, Luca.
Thank you very much, Adrian. It's time for me now to thank all of our panelists and thank the audience for attending the conference. The video will be published on a dedicated page in the days to come. And oh, sorry, maybe Maxime, you wanted, I wasn't sure that Maxime was still with us. Maxime, if you wanted to add something on the workforce training in France for deep renovation. I'm sorry.
Maxime has left.
All right. Oh, okay. So okay, the video will be published on a dedicated website page in the days to come. If you want to have the slides before and for any further information, please send us a message at contact@climat-2020.eu. And to keep pushing for solutions to finance the ecological and solidary transition in Europe, you may join Agir pour le Climat, Act for Climate at pacte-climat.eu. All this information will appear on the last visual. A good day to you all. Thank you very much.